Hi,
All right.
everybody. Welcome back to the City Confessions. I am so excited because we are joined by the lovely Jeff Lee. He is the CEO and co-founder of Dibs Beauty, which is all about mistake-proof products you reach for over again and again. And previously, he was the COO of A-Rod Corp, where he consulted and helped build multiple household names in beauty and wellness. As I was reading your bio, I was so impressed because I literally feel like you've lived like five lives. So I would love to dive into all of your, different paths so far. So before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? Tell us who you are, what you do, and what your relationship is with New York City.
Oh, I love it. And it's so great to meet, someone in journalism like yourself, Marianne, who has a real passion for lifestyle and for all these different areas that make New York great. And I'm a native Californian by trade. I was born and raised in Southern California to Taiwanese immigrants, the ultimate conservative Asian family that you can imagine. In fact, we like to joke that my mom was the original Tiger Mom. I joke about that too, Amy Chua, who was my professor and the author of that famous memoir when I was in law school. And, I have to say, I'm going to go in reverse. My relationship to New York City is love and hate. It's a place where you can do anything, meet incredible people like yourself. I mean, we only had a few minutes just in passing, and it was such an eclectic group the day we met when we launched Dibs back in September. And you just meet people who I think New York has a great way of bringing out the amazing differences and special superpowers that everyone has. So there are some cities that I think funnel people into conformity, and New York is the opposite. It takes unique people and it brings out those qualities in them. And so that's the part that I love about New York. Now, I'm a subway guy. I get car sick, so transportation drives me insane. And there's also just the fact that in New York, right, it can be an exhausting grind. People don't want to admit it, but it is a nonstop hustle in the city. And I think there's some value to, being able to leave the city or to get your own time to recharge, get off of the rat race. And the
Mhm.
pandemic has been kind of surprisingly good for that. So, it's much more love than it is hate, but I'm going to use some very strong words when it comes to New York because there's no in between.
No, and I love it because over here we love to talk about it being raw, right? It's not about what we want to hear. It's about like let's just cut to the chase and let's just be real. So, I also know that you study law and I'm just so curious to know how did you embark on that path and where you are today because I'm not saying law and beauty doesn't relate, but I am curious to see how you got here.
All right. Well, people love to talk about the career pivot, right? And I actually love this class by my good friend and mentor, Allison Kluger. I come and speak to it whenever I can at Stanford, which is about career pivots. But I think the word pivot is a bit of a misnomer. I always say that my career runs on a train track. And then if you have another passion or interest, you got to lay the tracks over, right, alongside until you're ready to make the decision to kind of switch over and go on to a different lane. And that was the trajectory for me. So as a kid, I was a strange kid. I was, had lots of weird passions ranging from orchids to cacti to ancient Egypt. But from a career perspective, I knew I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. I loved being a corporate lawyer. It's a nonstop grind. It is probably one of the hardest, actually physically taxing jobs that you can do in an office, especially when I was doing it, which was in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis. So, what it did was it normalized the idea, frankly, of working 120-hour weeks, of really grinding, of being physically in an office with a team. And these are things that have really fallen away from our work culture now. But the fact is, there is nothing like being in that kind of a furnace. And my life has always been about pursuing excellence wherever you can find it. And I get asked about work-life balance all the time. I was speaking at a law school class last week, and all the kids are thinking about corporate law jobs. They're like, "Oh, is there work-life balance?" And I was like, and it has nothing to do with the firm you're at, the caliber of the work, whatever. It's the nature of the work. if you're working on something that's extraordinarily complex, and the great thing about corporate law is that it requires you to both be so extraordinarily precise that there's a famous case where a single comma, had it been like a semicolon or a period, made the difference of about $450 million in the contract, like a single punctuation point in a 150-page single-spaced contract, right? Like there's that kind of surgical precision, but it also requires you to constantly think above the fray. You kind of think, where is this deal or this case headed? How do I be a strategic advisor to my client? So you have to be able to parallel track both kind of captaining the ship and drilling down and figuring out, are we leaking anything down below? And that's actually pretty similar in a lot of ways to beauty, in the sense that as a co-founder and a CEO of this company, I have an incredible co-founder who is a visionary and has a great idea of what people like her want. She's a busy mom. We created these products with their lifestyle in mind. You know, we said we are on a mission to make beauty accessible for people who don't want to listen to, don't have the time to do a 40-minute tutorial on YouTube. But at the same time, to your point, right, mistake proofing was key. They don't want like the extreme clinical, minimalistic, doctor's office type look. They want to feel good and have color on it. And so that was the vision, right? To elevate your everyday essentials, to really improve, upgrade on the must-haves that are out there in the market. But in terms of the execution, right? Like, and every day, my job is to kind of steer the ship. We have an incredible team, and to just constantly make sure that we're all driving the same direction. But I also drill down into the weeds. And for over a year, when we were developing Dibs, I remember, I think, telling you this when we were going over the formulations. I could tell you every single ingredient. I could tell you why it was put in. I could tell you what alternative ingredients we looked at and why we chose what we chose. And, it's still the case that I sit down with our product developers and I sit down with the chemists for the first round of every product we even think about creating. I, have the ingredients in mind. Like, I drill down to that level, because that's really where the two things, the two fields intersect. It's about creating a craft and perfecting it. And, we're not Olympic swimmers at when you're talking about lawyers or beauty product people, but, you don't get anywhere without putting 10,000 hours in, right? I'm sure for you, becoming a podcaster, you have natural charisma. I've seen it in person, but I'm sure, right, it took a couple episodes for you to find your feet. And I'm sure now, City Confessions is it's an institution. You really have, your sea legs behind you, underneath you.
I honestly think it maybe has to do with the fact that, you live in New York now, correct?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And I've lived here all my life, and there is just something super contagious about the energy. And I always say New York isn't for everybody. And of course, I'm prideful and I will say it's like the best city in the world. But I do think it gives you something that a lot of other places don't, which is why people dream. They literally book one-way tickets to come here. And that is something that I was just like, when I really wrapped my mind around that concept, I was like, wow, I'm so grateful, because I didn't choose. Nobody chooses where they're really born and raised, right? Until they could be an adult and financially make that decision. So it's so interesting. But I know that your co-founder is Courtney Shields.
Yes.
I know that you personally advocate for women leadership and all of that.
Yes.
I just love and admire about you. So how did you meet her? And I guess tell me about just your passion and I guess values for women leadership.
Oh, you saw how I reacted just now. This is such an unexpected question, and you can tell it's a real passion of mine. So, Courtney and I basically met like a speed date, like on Zoom. This is a pandemic-founded company. We are an Austin brand. We're headquartered in Austin, and I spend as much time as I can there as well. I'm actually going to be, permanently splitting my time between the two cities, because it is fundamentally an Austin brand, and I didn't want this to be a New York brand or an LA brand. Courtney and I agreed we're speaking to all 50 states from a different place. But this was born in the pandemic, and she and I were arranged. It was a setup, like a blind date, if you will, by the founders of Tula, who are these two incredible guys named Dan Reich and Ken Landis. Ken also was the brains in many ways behind the Bobbi Brown business. So these two incredible guys, I had known them through the beauty world, been in touch with them, and they said, "Why don't you just meet Courtney?" Why don't you go and you meet Courtney, see what it is? We instantly hit it off, right? And you just know when you're in the room with someone, even if you're not physically with them, if there's that chemistry, whether professional, personal, hopefully it's, and we really hit it off. And one of the things that I loved too about her was, that we're the age of the influencer celebrity brand. And I talk about this a lot with people in the industry. Everyone wants to be a Fenty, and they always want to just plug the talent with the CEO and put them together and go make Fenty. That's not how it works, right? You really need people that are complementary to each other, because the business is so much more than just plugging someone in and playing. And what I love about Courtney is her true passion for beauty. She is that girl who on the school bus was helping all the other kids with how do you braid their hair, put on their tutorials, and she's made makeup unintimidating to people for the last decade of her life. So that's an authenticity that you just simply can't recreate. You can't just like wake up one day and say, I'm going to go and sell you a skincare or makeup or hair care line because I'm, famous or influential and I have access to like this team. No, you've got to have built up that credibility. And that's what struck me about her. She and I, it doesn't matter if it's a weekend, public holiday. Like last night, we were texting each other about a product. I was like, I want to get your thoughts. Is this the right direction? And, she sends me her notes. This was late at night, she's a mom, she's working. And so that's the part that I love about her, right? And the reason why I think this business is so uniquely situated. And you've met her too, so you know how warm and kind of hands-on she is. She's demoing the makeup on you when you're in the room. She's not just like, oh, enjoy, you're welcome. Now, woman in leadership, I could literally talk your head off for an hour. I'm going to try to contain myself. It started, I would say from an academic perspective, it really started in college. And I was an international relations major. It's still one of my fundamental academic passions. It's flown through my law career and everything. And my interest then was, how do we elect more women to presidencies? Not in the United States, because this was before, we had major, presidential candidates that were women. This was, let's start with Latin America. How do we get women into these positions of power where they don't have to be the wives or daughters of male presidents or prime ministers? Because that's when you truly, see a shift towards equality or representation at the top level. And what I think surprises a lot of people, and I think when I presented, my research, I think like all of these like old school poli sci professors just kind of taken aback. And I'm going to teach this class at Chicago Booth this coming March as well, which is I show all of the women leaders of the 20th century. And if you look at all of them going from the 80s, 90s, really with only 2 or 3 minor exceptions, they have one common thing, other than being the wife or the daughter of a president. They have short cropped hair. Like they don't wear shoulder length hair. And it's like, it sounds so inconsequential. And you might ask yourself, well, why does this matter? Well, it matters, right? Because these women, whether or not you were a Margaret Thatcher or you were an Indira Gandhi, you came of a Golda Meir, you came of age when you only had the archetype of the alpha male leader to look to, right? And things have now shifted dramatically. We obviously have a vice president who presents in a much different way than, say, the woman of the past did, right? Or even some of her peers. Like you might call Angela Merkel an example of a more old school style leader, right? If you're going to talk about even just the visuals, right? She wears a pantsuit, very short cropped hair. You have very young prime ministers in Finland and in New Zealand who are in their 30s, early 40s, and very open about being working moms or daughters, and very open about speaking about the aspects of their life. And I think what's really key here is it shows the world that from a visual, from a personality, from all these different standpoints, you don't need the one mold to be a leader, right? And so if you're thinking, and this is applicable to, I think, many minorities, I mean, it's just speaking from the Asian experience, right? I look at the screen now and, it would have been inconceivable for us to look at the screen and say, wow, there's going to be Simu Liu and Bowen Yang on SNL representing us, right? Like, because before there wasn't either. And now you've got like two different, they made it that kind of joking about it, like two different archetypes of the Asian experience. And that's really what I think the goal of doing these studies is, and what my passion is in terms of elevating women into leadership. Because when women break through on the basis of different characteristics and kind of like this preset mold where they have to conform, and there's nothing wrong if that is your natural style. It obviously works very well for a lot of great female leaders. But if you open up the spectrum of what we think of when we think of a leader, how she looks, talks, presents, what she talks about, then you get more space for different kinds of leadership, period. And that's really like the crux of it.
Oh, I love it. I think when I was hearing you speak, one thing that stood out to me was just this concept of like breaking the mold. And I feel like even you are a great example of that, because a lot of times I think people define themselves off of like a title, whether that's, a CEO of a beauty company or an artist or a blogger, but it's like, we are so much more than that. And it's like, when you introduce yourself, it's not like, hi, I'm, so-and-so, and I do this. It's more like, who are you at your core? What are your passions? What are you like advocating, what you value for? And again, I was alluding this in the beginning, but I do think you have worn so many hats. Like, I know you even were like a Miss Universe coach, which is insane. So I guess my next question is, throughout all these different paths and lives that you somewhat have lived, it's like, what was that one moment where, I don't want to call it your rock bottom, but it was like a very difficult time? And this can obviously be related to the pandemic and like Dibs Beauty recently, or something personal in your law, career or journey. But just, what is that one moment that stands out to you where you maybe learned the biggest lesson?
I think I've always viewed life as kind of a battle, right? You have to get up off the mat. You have to just keep getting up off the mat, no matter how you're knocked down, whether it's in business or personal, matters, your relationships with your friends, your partners, your family, or whether or not it's, whether or not you got the job that you dreamed of, or in many cases I didn't. I think my career trajectory looks very linear. It was like, oh, he made up this big plan and then jumped to the next one and boom, and hasn't. And really the rock bottom points have been when I forced myself to say, look, it isn't about getting something, about getting the right friendship, the right partner, business or personal, about getting to the right place in life. Because, I grew up in the culture, which I think you might understand, which was get into the right school and then everything else is great. Yeah. Right? Like, lead, to your point, right? Lead with getting into with your academic credentials. I'm very proud of my academic credentials. I worked hard for them. I know you worked hard for yours, right? Like, I'm not shy about it, and like, I'm not shy about the blood and sweat and tears that went into, our respective fields of study. But does that define me? No. And I think the rock bottom was really realizing, right? You have to kind of like sit back and you have to say, okay, underneath all these layers of amazing experiences, things you project to the world, credentials, what have you, what are you at the core? Mm-hmm. And for me, right, there was that period where it allowed me to realize, look, a lot of the things that really drove me early on, I mean, I really had a chip on my shoulder being Asian, for a very long time. And I still kind of do, it's a highly motivating one. Grew up Asian in Newport Beach. My sister and I were basically the only ones in the city, and I was I wanted to be the first Asian partner in the M&A department in Sullivan and Cromwell who wasn't in the Hong Kong or Beijing office. It went through my whole professional career. But then I think you also start to realize, hey, to your point about what you value, I always like to say, during the last few years, I've learned sometimes the hard way. What I value about myself is really the fact that I'm an ethical leader. I'm an ethical partner. I'm an ethical team player. I truly believe in it. And I think there's a really there's like a real moment when I realized, hey, I'm not interested in winning all the time. I'm actually just interested in being able to look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm okay. And there was a line that a dear friend and mentor, her name is Yusai Khan. She was essentially the Oprah of China, the most famous woman in China throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Really incredible mentor. And Yusai who is single-handedly credited for bringing makeup actually to China. She was the first woman to introduce the modern concept of lipstick to a billion Chinese at the time. She always said to me, you know what? I have never made a single cent off of someone else's misery. And it just like stuck with me. And it's been such a kind of guiding light for how I am in my life personally and professionally, right? I'm not perfect, obviously, but that really has been, a long-winded way of answering. Like, that's what I learned. And I also want to relate it to something you said. I was listening to your podcast about what you've learned in these very trying times, and about knowing about your gut intuition, right? Just like being confident in yourself, right? Not second guessing yourself, right? And you spoke very, very eloquently, during your own kind of solo podcast about that. And I truly think that, like, if you were going to take anything out of this horrible time that we've been living in, it's like, who are you? Like, what are you underneath it all, right? Like,
well, first of all, thank you for listening to my podcast. And second of all, I think I don't know if it comes with age and experience though, because I think oftentimes it's when you experience trauma, obstacles, those low points, it's like you can't live in those moments forever. There will come a time where you honor those, feelings and that place that you're in. But there's going to come a time where you're like, okay, if I want to make a change, or if this is not how I feel like my soul aligns with, this is not the trajectory of my life that fulfills me, then you have to take action, right? And I think another thing that I realized was I spoke about this in the episode, but like outsourcing my intuition. And therefore, like, I would always feel something wasn't aligning. And it's amazing because when you do turn inwards, like, you have all the answers. And I think this can be applied to business and personal life. Sometimes we think we don't know what we want, and we think we don't know what is our source of happiness. But if we actually, listen to our bodies and our minds and our souls in a way, like, you'll figure it out. And that's what has been super, I think, humbling and grounding for me, especially during the pandemic. It's like, no, you got this, right? Like, it's okay. And I love that you said, like, I'm okay. Because I do that sometimes. When I'm feeling anxious, I just breathe and I'm like,
you're okay. You got this, right? And it's such a New York thing, because of the way that we live, I think people don't quite understand if you're not in the city, right? Even if you and I could be next door neighbors and not see each other for years, unless we scheduled something, right? And the cadence of our lives is kind of like, even for your good friends, let's say your close friends, and then like maybe that like semi-nebulous circle outside of your closest 5 to 10, right? For most people, this is what I think I'm seeing in a lot of my world. You will schedule that catch up, either because it's a regular interval or something's happened, something big where you just want their opinion, whether it's dating, whether it's business, whether it's family, whatever, or you're just going nuts being cooped up in your apartment. And then you go, when you talk about oversharing, I was like, yes, I literally find someone, and then we both dump at each other for 3 hours, and you leave. And maybe you feel better. I think you feel better because you have another voice in the room, someone, that human contact. But how often has it really actually changed how you fundamentally felt going in? I think very rarely. It does happen, right? But your intuition is your intuition. I think that's what you were getting at. And at this point, right, there's no way like around it. So just embrace it.
Yeah. And I think one thing I learned from what you said is that we have a tendency to want to vent. I mean, not all of us. Sometimes, people process things differently. But I think for me, I'm always like, I need to get this out. I need to get advice. But it's like, I chose to just sit with it. And I say, okay, I'm going to, try to process this myself internally for 3 days. And then by the third day, I'm like, I don't even need to ask my friend or tell my friend, because I've solved it. It's like the same thing when you're upset. They always say, like, if you want to like fire an email, just like write a draft, like, to yourself. Don't put that other person.
Don't put the email. Like, yeah, I some people do this where they put the address into like the send. I was like, no.
Like, put it in a note or something, and then like a day, 2 days, like literally, I think the magic number is like 72, like 48 to 72 hours. You don't even feel that way, and if you do, then clearly, address it. But I think there needs to be that cushion time.
I think you're so right. And I mean, my sister was joking to me. She goes, Jeffrey, like my family calls me by my full first name. She's like, think about it this way. She's like, what do you call it? She goes, I think like we call it like halt, where you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. don't don't send it, because I was thinking about doing something like that like a few months ago. She was just just like cracking me up, because my sister's just such a titan, and she's like, she just had her second child, and she works full time, also, hardcore in the tech industry, and works harder than I do, with stronger backbone. But she was just like, halt, because she's much more, I take a lot of cues from her. I'm very volcanic, and like, how I am, and she's like much more like still waters run deep. I do think that it's also a lesson in terms of how you lead. And I loved this about Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod, but I'll never call him A-Rod unless, like, it's for introductory purposes. It's such a strange title to me, because the guy has such equanimity all the time, and that was the thing that I loved about working with him, and that I really kind of strive to emulate when I'm in my position here, which is, no matter his mood, right? No matter if he's stressed, the guy has faced bigger stress and kind of like everything you can imagine that most humans would ever. It's just always, the game face is on, and he doesn't let it spill into the company or the management. Like, there's no like venting, or whatever. And it's one of the things that I really, really appreciate about his example, because look, your mood affects everyone around you, and especially if you do bring it into the workplace, like then you're putting your whole team onto the line. And I know that we're in this age, right, where people want to be much more open. Like, the boundaries around what's acceptable in workplace culture are different. But I still come from that old school mentality that we learned in the law firm, which is like, at the end of the day, the two are separated. It's okay if you have something going on, obviously, that you've got to take care of it if it's something true. But then understand that when you're doing your job, you're doing it for the mission, for what the entire company is standing for, and that everyone should be an owner of the business. And if you're all an owner of that boat, then you gotta keep rowing. You can't like stop everything. And I have to remind myself that quite often when it's a bad day even one area of the business, to make sure that the rest of the business goes on unimpeded. We've had, like any startup, there are a million fire drills, five fires, whatever. And I just have to remember, okay, I might be feeling really down about something over here, but think how blessed I am that the rest of this is so amazing, and that the amazing people here, and I owe it to them to resolve this, let them know I'm taking care of this, or some other member of the team's taking care of this, and that they should be 100% forward, positive. Every day is a new day.
Yes. It's all about perspective. I always look at everything as the cup, half full and empty. And like, once you do that, you're training your mind to see all the like positives in a situation. And that's like what I love. So I love that we share like a similar mindset.
Marianne, I hope you keep reminding people of that mindset, because I don't think it's a New York mindset.
No, it's not.
I think New York trains you, right? Like, New York trains you not to look up at the buildings, because then you're a tourist, right? But then you're also looking, but then because if you look up in wonder, and you think, oh, I live in this incredible city filled with these skyscrapers that people in other cities could only dream of living amongst. You're trained in New York, right, to kind of look slightly higher than your line of sight, because you're always trying to think, how do I get a little higher? How do I get a little more money, a little more fame, a little more prestige, whatever, what have you. I like to say it's a bunch of nines looking for 11s in the city, right? It's like, extrapolate however you want. Yeah. And when you do that, right, you don't appreciate what you have, because that was me in my 20s for sure.
No, you're
right. It was me constantly.
Yes. No, I always tell people that I used to be so angry at the world. And it was because I was allowing all these external factors, especially from the city, to affect me, and then I was just like, I don't know, it was just like not a good mindset and a good place. And then I would try to pretend like life was working against me, when in reality, I was working against it. And then so I shifted the mindset to think, no, life is working for me. Then I'm allowed to say, okay, not everything is just like, it's not me against the world, it's me.
The highs are so high here, and the lows can be so low that they make you think that it is the world, right? That is the city. You have a terrible date. I've been on that world, right? Like, you have a terrible date, or someone turns out to not be the person you thought that they would be, right? Or you have great hopes for this incredible job and it's terrible, right? You're grinding yourself and you're not being appreciated, or the door's constantly being thrown in your face. And you're just wondering, how do I get up off the mat? But it's not about being a fight, right? It's about just saying, look, you wake up grateful for each day and remember, just because there's a crappy person over there, it doesn't mean that the 95 other people in your life aren't incredible and wonderful, right? And think about how lucky, we are to have what we have. No, and it's not relative to other people. And I think that there's also that part about beauty as well, which I think is really fascinating too, because nothing, there's nothing more intimidating, right, than like meeting a woman who has the sash and a crown that says she's the most beautiful woman internationally or on earth or in the world or in the universe. There's a pageant for all of those, right? And then when you get to know them and their insecurities and what they're wondering about, and they're like, can you imagine, right? Because everyone grows up with being insecure about how they look. Yep. And then you win a title that actually like empirically verifies that you're Miss World, like you're Miss Universe, you're Miss Earth, you're Miss, Galaxy, right? I mean, and you get a diamond crown. Like you would think that would be like the pinnacle, right? It's like if you ever wondered if you were smart and then you got like, a fucking Nobel Prize in chemistry. But then you realize then she's like, well, there's going to be a new one next year. Or the fans wrote lists about me, or X, there's always a story. So I think it's also a reminder to enjoy what you're doing on a day-to-day, right? Because you made that point about not living in the moments of the low, but you should also never live, I think in my mind, in the moments of the high. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget when Alex and I went to the Wimbledon Royal Box. And I mean, he was starstruck. I mean, like this guy who's like this, and we were seated behind the Crown Prince of Denmark with the Duke of Kent. All the cameras are on us. And, I turned to him, I was like, we're two immigrant kids, who are sitting in like literally the pinnacle of aristocracy, right? And we're just going to enjoy this moment because, well, you might be back. I'm certainly never going to be back in that seat. And it was a great moment. It was magical. But I would absolutely trade that moment for 30 days of like the day-to-day conversations or wrestling with him over some business matter or something, because that was the true enjoyment and fulfillment that I think we got out of our professional relationship versus the extreme high that everyone looks at on the Instagram or wherever, right? And it's like, as a brand, we have huge highs. You saw us at our press launch. We were nervous. We're like, oh, we hope Marianne and all of these very stunning people enjoy our products. And it's such a high. But then there's the day-to-day, after this, I'm going to be on Zooms till 7 p.m. And then it's a lot of, Slack after that. But I love that. That's a day-to-day. That's a hard grind, of like, is this like, do I change the color here? Or like, why is this not the right, that's the thing I enjoy, as much as it is fun doing press events, of course.
No, I love that you acknowledge that there's like, different areas of the spectrum is highs and lows and coasting as well. So I honestly could talk to you forever, like always, but we are wrapping this up and my podcast is called The City Confessions. So I would love for you, Jeff, to share a confession with me and the listeners. And this can be anything. It can be personal. It can be funny. It can be surface level. It's however you receive the question. But basically, it's kind of like what you said, right? As people living in New York, operating business in New York, we're always like constantly going. But I feel like what is a fun thing to kind of unite us all are these like confessions that I label. So they can be secrets. It can just be fun facts. It's like we're more than, again, our titles, right? Yeah. So if you can share a confession, what would that be?
I love Times Square.
Oh my God.
I love Times Square. I love it so much. I walk through it angry and full of haughty energy as I'm like swinging my Tom Brown coat very fast. I can't believe I have to go to this Sephora to check up on this thing. Oh, no, I love Times Square. You know why I love Times Square? I love Times Square because I first came to New York as, a junior in college, 2005. And I remembered like I didn't know anything geographically about New York, and I saw the lights in the distance, and I walked towards it, and I just like California kid. I was like, what is this place?
Mm.
I would never forget that feeling. And I think I am one of the most brusque people on the street. I apologize to you, apologize to your listeners. If you see me on the street, you have to stop me, and then I'm obviously gonna be super friendly to you because I am a very friendly person. But when I walk, I walk. I will mow you down. I don't care. I'm on my way somewhere. I don't make eye contact. I am a fast
Yeah.
walker. But when I walk through Times Square, I double the speed and I double the don't go near me energy.
Yep.
But I love seeing the faces of those tourists as much as I am elbowing past them. Get out of my way. I love seeing it because everyone deserves to feel welcome and to have a bit of that wonder. You think about all the people who saved up all their lives. This is their big trip.
Yeah.
To be able to come and look at that and to feel, because I know that feeling, even as much as I consider myself a New Yorker now.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we have one quick final fire round related to ask a question, and the first word that comes to your mind, you answer. Okay.
Let's go.
Favorite thing about New York?
Favorite thing? Cheesecake.
Worst thing about New York?
Rats.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh, this is a tough one. Thai market up on like 105th in Amsterdam.
Okay. If you could describe New York City in one word.
Exuberant.
And if you can thank New York City for one thing.
Heightening every sensation and experience in my life.
Amazing. Well, this conversation was so lovely. And I want to take a moment now to just send you my gratitude because I know how busy your schedule is. So for you to schedule time out of your day to come speak with me and my listeners, I'm grateful for that. And I'm like present with you. I've been present with you. I've been taking everything that you've said. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And right now is your chance to plug away. I'm going to have all of your information, the show notes and the posts, but do you have anything that you're working on that's a secret that you can tell us? What can the world be on the lookout from you, Jeff, or Dibs Beauty in 2022?
Yes. Well, Marianne, I'm so excited to let you know and our listeners know. Well, first of all, we have a hero product, which you saw, the Desert Island Duo, the bronzer blush. And I mean, this thing has sold out 3 times. The second time it was selling 20 times a minute. I mean, I was like literally looking at it. I was like, is it going to break our warehouse system? And it's because it's such a simple, incredible product. It's a bronzer on one end, bronzing for all. You can contour, but also use it as a real bronzing stick, and also the blush on the other end. And people are using this as eyeshadow, as lip color. It's delicious, high quality formula. We created the machine that makes this too. So this is a custom product. And we have been sold out for 3 months now. People DM hundreds of messages a week for it. It's coming back imminently in the next 2 weeks. And not only that, we have more shades coming. So I'm really excited to share that with you. I think you're going to really love what we're bringing out this year for Dibs, which is, first of all, I want to celebrate all skin tones. It's a mission of mine. We're all about that. It's not inclusivity for inclusivity's sake. It's about elevating and uplifting and really actually zeroing in on what the full range of the human experience needs and wants, right? Not just we're including you because we have to and like, oh, doors open. No, you're going to come into the house and we're going to make you the cocktail that's just for you, right? That's like my philosophy. If you drink, I don't really drink. But the other thing too is just that the products are still in line with our attitude, which is it's going to simplify and elevate your everyday. These are the must-haves, but like they're just going to add more joy. And if they don't do that, we won't release them. So my team hates me right now. I mean, I just like ran everyone through a fire drill where I almost canceled a product. And it's like, and I was like, normally on the business side, you don't have someone who does that. And I said, no, this is not ready to go. And both Courtney and I are aligned, unless it's perfect, unless we can get to the price point where people can access it and enjoy it. It's not going out. We'll just sell more of what we already have. So I'm excited to share all that. You'll obviously be the first to know, and just to, and to also just to reconnect hopefully with you and the rest of the city, as we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you so much. Honestly, I love talking to you. You're just so I don't know, natural. You make me feel so comfortable. And it's like a great conversation that I don't feel like we're recording just to record. like we are connecting. So thank you.
That's the important thing. Thank you for all your incredible work and insights. I love all the crazy guests that you have on. I learned so much about Big and Lovely the other day. I was like, damn.
Confessions family.
Fingers crossed, right? And thanks so much, Marianne.
All right. So everybody listening, thank you so much. Again, make sure you follow Jeff and Dibs Beauty. Click on the show notes. And yeah, I will see you all next week. All right. Bye.